I'll get started. This time of year, there is a tradition in the media to publish reviews of the 12 months just gone. So this talk represents my own survey of the year 2020 in terms of the new books and other media events which have appeared on the radar of my research. My research being camp modernism, which can be thought of as the intersection between camp, which is typically associated with exaggeration and irony, external surfaces, and overly externalized mannerisms, and also with homosexual subcultures. Modernism, meanwhile, is a label associated with fragmentation, with depth, and with interiority. Until recently, these two concepts were thought incompatible, so much so that modernism has sometimes been thought as a mainly heterosexual idea because it doesn't lend itself to camp. There's certainly a hint of that theory in the title of one of my books of 2020. No Modernism Without Lesbians by Diana Suhami suggests in its title alone that if modernism is associated with depth and internalized experience, that tends to mean heterosexual depth and heterosexual experience. Suhami's title is even something of a camp flourish, suggesting that modernism is just another kind of artificial category that needs to be playfully questioned. The book touches on camp in the case of the work of the writer Gertrude Stein, who often used humour, innuendo, and wordplay to create a space for a new form of lesbian identity. The book Decadent Catholicism by Martin Lockhart touches on the complicated way that Victorian decadence drew upon the aesthetics of Catholicism, yet playfully mocked them as well, thus evolving eventually into 20th century campness. The single most referenced essay on camp, Susan Sontag's Notes on Camp from 1964, is not only dedicated to Oscar Wilde, but it is written in the style of Wilde's aphorisms, which is why it's so quotable. Masks, the book Masks, is a collection of essays by Slavoj Žižek and others, loosely inspired by the way the singer David Bowie put on masks of different personae to make his music. The book includes a new essay on the Edwardian novelist Ronald Firbank, who is my thesis' main subject. I argue that Firbank is the most useful example of camp modernism in literature. 2020 has rather turned out to be the year of the mask, so this book now helps to remind the reader how a mask can be a happy tool of positive artistic liberation, as well as an unhappy tool of enforced medical restriction. There's also been a book of essays on the writer Brigid Brophy, who wrote the most substantial book on Ronald Firbank, called Prancing Novelist in 1973, and a few novels which I'd like to recommend. Two debut novels published in 2020, Lot by Schola von Reinhold, which uses decadent camp to address the lack of black queer visibility in modernism, while Ely Williams's The Liar's Dictionary builds on Gertrude Stein's style of playful lesbian wordplay. And there was also a new edition of Brigid Brophy's 1964 novel, The Snowball, which expresses queerness in a playful and baroque way. The academic essay of the year for me was Kate Hecht's Rethinking the Origins of Camp, the Queer Correspondence of Carl van Vechten and Ronald Firbank. Dr. Hecht originally presented this essay as a paper at a conference at Birkbeck in 2016. I only found out about this conference a year afterwards. When I contacted Dr. Hecht to ask if she was publishing her paper, she said that she was, but I had to wait until the journal Modernism/Modernity got round to it. They did, this year. So I had to wait 3 years to read this essay, which in itself was a lesson on the workings of academic publishing. Probably the best known example of camp modernism in literature is Virginia Woolf's novel Orlando, a Biography from 1928, about a young Elizabethan nobleman who lives into the 20th century and changes into a woman. In 2020, Holly James Johnston, a postgraduate researcher who also performs as a lip-syncing drag act called Orlando, created a series of photographs titled Orlando in Lockdown. The original book by Woolf came with playful photographs of her muse and lover, Vita Sackville-West, dressed as Orlando. So this project is both a tribute to Woolf's book and also an investigation of the connection between cosplay, as in costume play, the practice of dressing up as an established fictional character, and drag, a practice that more comes under the umbrella of camp. Cosplay and drag are both expressions of identity, of alignment within culture, and of consolidating the self within the world. And like masks, they are a form of armor. In a pandemic, even more so. The field of drag in 2020 saw a historical moment this month, which relates to the implications of Orlando. The American drag queen Gottmik was announced as the first transgender male contestant to appear on RuPaul's Drag Race, as in the original American TV series. Gottmik was assigned female at birth and transitioned surgically to a male identity, and now uses drag as part of their gender identity. Indeed, Gottmik sometimes exposes their chest, proudly including their own mastectomy scars as part of their drag. Speaking to Gay Times magazine, Gottmik calls drag the most healing and all-inclusive art form. When scars from gender transition surgery are used in this visible way, it is clear that camp has never been more relevant in terms of a healing strategy, in this case for someone with gender dysphoria. This idea of drag as a strategy of healing further relates to the video that you may have watched in advance of this talk. We'll Meet Again, Drag Queens in Quarantine, features the Vera Lynn song, We'll Meet Again, lip-synced by 25 drag queens in full costume, all filmed in isolation in video conferencing mode around the world, in aid of the charity Age UK, which benefits elderly people in isolation. The performance begins with one drag queen, Cheddar Gorgeous, who's also known as Dr. Michael Atkins, who has a PhD in social anthropology. As the song begins, Cheddar Gorgeous takes off her COVID-19 mask to reveal the more historical mask of drag makeup, the mask of personal choice behind the mask of state regulation. So this is a camp joke saturated in semiotic interpretation, and it reminds the viewer how the drag practice of lip syncing requires the lips to be seen, even though the sound is not theirs. As a queer theorist Eve Sedgwick writes, this irrepressible fascination with ventriloquistic experimentation is part of a communal, historically dense exploration of a variety of reparative practices under the umbrella term of camp. If today's conference is about remote assembly, here is a rich example of that very concept. And the choice of the charity reminds us that isolation is an age-related issue, and indeed COVID-19 is an age-related issue. If the state has prescribed us mandatory masks and social distancing, then we can look to camp, which plays with ideas of masking and indeed distancing. To exaggerate something, to camp it up, is to perform a distancing move, stepping away from the normative to the parodic, yet still with a degree of affection for the material at hand. Indeed, the viewer may find, as I do, that this video is not just entertaining, but poignant, even moving. It even includes a camp joke at the voyeuristic culture of video chatting, when one queen is revealed to be sitting on the toilet. Most of them, though, perform against backdrops rather than grant us a glimpse into their own domestic interiors. We are not all in this together. Many of us can't afford to live in rooms of our own choice. So the mask of drag is a defense against poverty as well as isolation. Finally, at the other end of the camp spectrum, consider the headlines about Donald Trump's campaign for re-election in October and November. Trump used the 1970s gay disco song YMCA by the Village People as part of his performances during the campaign, and he danced with his fists pumping to the music. Any political commentator trying to make sense of this had no other word in their critical toolbox to describe it except the word camp. It's Trumpian camp. It's pandemic camp. And according to Dr. Richard Shorten, lecturer in political theory at the University of Birmingham, Joe Biden's decency stands at sharp odds with what we might call, with a nod to Susan Sontag, Donald Trump's alt-right influenced inverted camp. The attraction, he says, lies in the transgression, the permission to act out in the place of dress up, with a get out clause that nobody, not really, is being serious. But the point of camp is that it operates at a distance away from the normative. So when camp appears at the heart of the normative, the White House, it cannot last for very long. Where camp can do good for society is providing what Eve Sedgwick calls the glue of surplus beauty, where the excessiveness of camp is a form of sustenance and healing for those who might need it. And let us not forget that one of the vaccines on the way, the Moderna vaccine, has been funded by none other than that camp icon of country music, Dolly Parton. So camp is a strategy of healing and
10
protection
minutes now.
in more ways than might be thought possible. Thank you.